evening, everyone. I see that it is around 6:30, and I know everyone just got out of work, so I don't want to start too late. So I thought that we should start on time, and hopefully we can end on time as well. So my name is Jessica, and I'm the CEO of Baker & Bloom. I see a lot of familiar names in our attendees today, but for some of you who are actually new to Baker & Bloom, I can give a very short introduction. So Baker & Bloom is actually a kindergarten to grade 12 education center. Today, we will mainly focus on our secondary program. So for our secondary program, we not only help students with exams, such as GCSE, A-levels, or IB DP, we also actually help them with UK and US university admissions. Our approach is both holistic and personalized, as we always want to focus on the student and also the student's family. We have helped many of our students get into their dream schools, which include the top universities in UK and US. And we're very excited to share a parent talk on UK university admissions today. Well, I also want to introduce our speaker, Ms. Alethea Bleyberg. She is actually our secondary division head. She is a veteran educator and college counselor with over a decade experience in different areas of the education field. She has a very long CV, and I think she will go through some of it by herself, so I will keep it short. Alethea provides a very unique perspective in the admission application process, as she is not only a college counselor, but as she will mention later, she is actually very experienced in different areas and different education systems. As a college counselor, she actually can provide extensive guidance in helping students with decisions in not only areas related to college application or university application, but also academics itself, because she is actually very well versed and an expert in the IBDP system as well. So I will keep it short so that I give enough time to Alethea. And so maybe I can give it to you, Alethea.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
Great. Okay, this is quite new to me, but I'm really excited to be here this evening, speaking to so many of you, and as you're coming in from the waiting room. I look forward to taking you through the do's and don'ts of applying to British universities. I want to keep plenty of question time for the end. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I think that I will not look at the questions until the presentation is finished. Maybe I will have answered your question by the end of the presentation, but certainly if I have not, feel free to ask me at the end of the presentation. Okay, so without further ado, let's get going. So just to introduce myself, as Jessica already very kindly started, I have been in international education for my entire career since 2006. My parents, in fact, were also international educators. I was taught by my parents. My father, in fact, also was a university guidance counselor and was my university guidance counselor. I have been in Asia since 2004. I started in Beijing and moved to Hong Kong in 2008. And since then, I've been at 5 different international schools, including ESF schools, including ISF and UCAS. I've held various roles in my time. I've been on the senior leadership team. I've been IB Diploma Coordinator. I've been an academic board member. I've been a head of department. I've been an extended essay coordinator, a theory of knowledge coordinator. I have been an examiner for the IB for theory of knowledge and the extended essay. I am currently on the IB's curriculum review team for the extended essay. I'm also, as Jessica said, an experienced teacher. Theory of knowledge is really my specialism, and teaching research skills for the extended essay. But I have also taught English literature, IB, English literature, language and literature, English B, so English as a second language, And I have also, of course, been a university guidance counsellor. My interest in university guidance counselling really started with my role as a form tutor. So when I was a form tutor at Sharting College, it was, part of my role to discuss university applications with students, and I was also my students' reference writer. And so having that responsibility and, having those conversations with students about their futures and about their careers and about what they wanted to study really got me interested in knowing more about the field. So I then enrolled in a Careers Education and Counselling program at Hong Kong University around 8 years ago now. And I graduated from that program and then became a university guidance counsellor. In addition to my teaching and administrative roles. And in a former school, I was responsible for the Oxbridge applications, which is a particular passion of mine because I went to Cambridge myself. But since then, I've supported students with applications to a whole range of countries on 3 different continents. So I feel like I'm in a strong position to be speaking to you this evening about an area of passion of mine and an area of expertise. Okay, so the way that I thought to structure this was around do's and don'ts, but covering a range of different facets of the UK application process. I think that you might have seen a poll when you entered from the waiting room, but I don't see the results of that poll. Oh, I think Phil has just helped me out here. Okay, the poll is in progress. So if you could just let me know if you are a parent of a year 13 or grade 12 student, or a parent of a year 12 grade 11 student, a parent of a younger student, or a student yourself. That will just give me a bit of information to know who I'm speaking to and what the level of urgency is, or what the level of interest is in terms of how immediate your UCAS application might be. Okay, the votes are coming in, and it's a positive picture. Lots of parents of younger students, so that means that you're here to get information for a future application, and a lot of parents of year 12 or grade 11 students who are again in a strong position because the application is not imminent. If you are the parent of a year 13 grade 12 student, then that application of course is currently ongoing and due within the next couple of months. All right, I think we have enough information there, so I'm going to end the poll. That was really useful. Okay, I've just shared those poll results so you can see, and I'll stop sharing them now. Okay. I just thought it would be interesting or useful to contextualize applications to British universities, especially in terms of what's been happening the last couple of years with so much disruption in higher education in general because of COVID and some other political events that have had knock-on effects. But I mean, the situation is that British universities have never been more popular. There are 150 universities in the UK and hundreds of other higher education institutions for things like music and dance and film. Applications to British institutions keep reaching record highs. In fact, Hong Kong is a really important applicant pool for British universities. So the biggest applicant pool comes from mainland China, but after that, the most applications come from Hong Kong. So that really tells you something about the level of popularity in Hong Kong for British universities. And in 2019, there were over 5,000 applications that came from Hong Kong-based students to British universities. The number of students from Hong Kong and mainland China studying in the UK has more than doubled in the last decade. And in fact, there are 500,000 international students who study at British institutions currently. There was one question that we received ahead of time to do with how the pandemic has affected the popularity of studying in the UK. Actually, last year saw a 10% increase in the number of applications over the previous year. And that might sound a bit surprising given that a lot of universities were not offering face-to-face classes last year, or had a hybrid situation of online classes with some face-to-face. But actually, if you think about it, some of the other things that students might do when they finish school at 18, such as go on a gap year or go traveling, they were far less likely, they were far less likely to undertake those kinds of activities. And so students really saw going to university as one of the only options for them during the pandemic. And so actually the number of applications to British universities increased last year. And we have no reason to suspect that there will be any change to that trend this year. And in fact, universities are expecting a record level of applications again, perhaps with a little bit of reduced demand from European students, because of course Brexit now means that European students need to pay full international fees. So there might be some reduction in applications from Europe, but overall British universities are still expecting a record or nearly record level of applications this year. Okay, so I've sort of structured the presentation in terms of do's and don'ts, and these are the do's. So the do's are understanding the UCAS system, doing your research, knowing your why, preparing well ahead of deadlines, having a sensible strategy about your 5 choices, spending time writing and editing your personal statement, helping your university guidance counselor with writing your reference, and focusing on academic achievement as much as possible. And then, of course, lastly, keep calm, and I'll explain what I mean by that at the end. So the UCAS system is really quite unusual in that all British or all applications to British universities are made centrally through the UCAS system. The UCAS organization, actually it stands for Universities and Colleges Admissions Service. It's actually a charity, but it's the charity that processes all applications. It's from your user standpoint, it's simply an interface, it's a website, it's a system where you input your applications and your information, and UCAS is really the mediator between you as the applicant and the universities that you choose to apply to. I think that UCAS has some enormous advantages over application systems in other countries. The first is that it's centralized, meaning that you make one application and that application gets sent to your choices. It is cheap because it is relatively simple. I think it is also fair to applicants. It does not need, for instance, a very high level of expertise in order to be able to send an application. And of course, it's extremely convenient. One thing which is restrictive about the UCAS application system is that students are only allowed to apply to 5 universities and or courses. And that is something about the British application system which might be news to you, or might be worrying to you, because to some people 5 doesn't sound like very much, although I hope to explain to you later that if you make your decisions wisely, actually 5 choices should always give you sufficient offers to be able to choose a university and a course where you will be happy. There is an earlier deadline for applications to conservatories, so if you're interested in studying music, also for Oxford and Cambridge, and all applications for medicine, veterinary science and dentistry. So whereas the deadline for most applications is the 15th of January every year, If you are applying to Oxbridge, medicine, veterinary science or dentistry, your deadline is significantly earlier than that. It's on the 15th of October. And the British system works very differently to the US system. In the US system, you apply to a college and the college will evaluate your application, and on the basis of that application they will either admit you, so we use that word for US applications, admit, or they will reject you. In the UK system, you apply to university with your predicted grades that are issued to you by your school, and the university looks at those predicted grades and will make you a conditional offer on the basis of those grades. Conditional offers mean that after the offer has been extended to you, you still need to achieve the conditions of the offer before you are actually admitted. So a conditional offer might specify what grades you need to get in your A-level exams or your GCSE exams or in your IB diploma, and they might specify specific subjects and specific scores. And it is only after you have actually achieved those that you've been accepted by the university. If you do not achieve the scores which are part of your offer, then you need to go back to the university, tell the university what's happened, and then it's up to their discretion whether they choose to accept you or not. That's why in the UCAS system, you will choose your firm and then your insurance offer. Your insurance offer is like your backup, and your insurance offer will have a slightly lower requirement in terms of the conditions that you need to meet. So if your firm choice has asked you for 36 points in the IB, your insurance probably should be around 33 or 34, so that if you fall just short of that 36, your insurance offer is still firmly met. So this is the timeline that we are looking at for this year, and this timeline doesn't change year on year. So the deadline, for instance, for Oxford and Cambridge is always the 15th of October, same for medicine, dentistry and veterinary science medicine. The deadline for the regular round, we call it sort of the regular round, which is all other courses, is in January. Then these are, the subsequent deadlines are additional deadlines for things such as clearing and extra. Essentially, we don't need to worry about that, but I will explain at the end of the presentation what those terms refer to. So the really important deadlines for us to remember are simply the 15th of October for Oxbridge, medicine, dentistry and veterinary science, and January for all other courses. So students will apply on the UCAS website, and they have to link their application to their school. So the school will give the students a code, which UCAS calls a buzzword, which links their application to the school. The reason why it needs to be linked to the school is that after the students have completed their side of the application, things like their personal statement, their choices and the courses that they want to apply for, that application then gets sent to the school initially. The school then has to complete on their side the predicted grades and the school reference, and the school has to tick to say that they agree that all of the qualifications that the student says that they have achieved actually have been achieved. And once the school has done those three things, then the application gets sent to UCAS. So even though we just discussed deadlines and we said that, for instance, the deadline that's coming up very soon is the October 15 deadline, that's not the deadline for students. So schools will set internal deadlines, which are a couple of weeks at least earlier than that, so that students have to complete their side of the application, and then the school can complete the school reference and the predicted grades as it needs to in order for that application to meet, to arrive at UCAS by the October 15 deadline. Okay, so it's perfectly acceptable for the school to set internal deadlines, and students should be prepared to meet those internal deadlines. They are there for a very good reason. They're not simply schools trying to be obstructive or get deadlines out of the way earlier than the actual deadline. They are there for good reason. Okay, so what's really important to understand for parents is that in the UK, students apply for specific courses at specific universities, which is very much unlike the American system if you are used to the American system, where students might simply apply to a college or say that they are an undeclared major, or apply for a broad spectrum liberal arts degree without a very specific idea of what career they want to pursue or what course they want to specialize in. In the British system, it is an expectation that at age 18 you know what course you want to study and you are committed to that particular subject. Increasingly, British universities are offering the ability to add 2 subjects into a degree program, so something like economics and psychology. And there is even a trend these days for universities to have started offering what they're calling a BA in liberal arts, which is a course which spans the humanities and sometimes languages, where students can pick and choose from different disciplines to make up a complete degree program. But that kind of approach of a very broad-based education where students would still be spanning the arts subjects, the humanities, social sciences, and the natural sciences, that doesn't really occur in the UK at all. So students need to have a very fixed idea or a very firm idea of what it is that they want to study at university. The other thing which I've already said is that you only have 5 choices in the UCAS system. Now, you are not bound to apply for exactly the same courses at all universities. In fact, you could choose maths at one university and English at another. But the thing which becomes very restrictive is that the personal statement that you write to support that application, you only have one of those. And so whichever, whatever you write in your personal statement, that is sent to all 5 of the universities that you apply to. And therefore, if, you've applied for maths at one university and written a personal statement about maths, but then you also apply to English at another university, the admissions officers are going to be extremely confused getting a personal statement which is all about the student's interest in maths if they've applied for English, and therefore that application is almost certainly unlikely to be successful. So students really need to have a very clear idea in mind of what they want to study, and they need to write a personal statement to support their interest in that particular subject. You should also be aware that students can apply to Oxford or Cambridge, but they can't apply to both of those. And students who apply for medicine or dentistry can only apply for 4 universities for that subject, for those subjects, or for the subject that they choose, whether it's medicine, dentistry. They're not allowed to apply to 5. So that means that students who apply for medicine will apply to 4 medical schools, and then for the 5th choice they'll apply usually for medical sciences or biological sciences, something in that field, for their 5th choice. I've already said that the UCAS application consists of 2 parts, so we don't need to go over that again. Okay, so the next part in terms of the do's is that you need to do your research, and these are just some things for you to think about. So when you start looking at British universities, you might notice that at Scottish universities, so that's universities like Edinburgh and Glasgow, you'll see that the degree programs are MAs or MScs rather than BAs or BScs. Just be aware that in Scotland, degree programs are named, MAs or MScs, but they're not actually master's level programs. It's a historical relic for why those courses are named that way. Scottish degree programs do tend to be 4 years though, although sometimes you can complete them in 3 years and then you just get a BA or a BSc. But the Scottish system is a little bit more like the US system, where you might have a year or 2 of a broader based education and then you would specialize after your 1st year. So if you are still very undecided about what subject you're interested in, you might want to look at Scottish universities. That could be a more beneficial system for you. You should also be aware of the difference between BAs, so those are Bachelors of Arts, versus BScs, which are Bachelors of Sciences, because obviously, if you get, if you do a degree in English or humanities, you are likely to get a BA. And if you do one in the natural sciences or a rigorous social science, you are likely to get a BSc. Some universities offer BAs and BScs in the same subject. So you might see, for instance, a university offering a BA and a BSc in economics, psychology, or even geography. And those courses are going to have different emphases. They're going to have different areas of focus. So a BA in geography might be more focused on human geography, and a BSc in geography might be more focused on the physical geography aspects and the scientific aspects of geography. Similarly, a BA in psychology might focus on developmental or social psychology, whereas a BSc might be focused on the neuroscience of the brain and cognitive psychology. So it's really very important that you read those details and that you understand what it is that you're applying for. Some other terms that we use in the UK are sandwich courses, to refer to four-year courses where students might, especially on their third year usually, go and do a year in industry, so a work placement that lasts up to a year. Or if you're studying a languages degree, the sandwich year, the third year, might be a live abroad year in the country where that language is spoken. Now, that, of course, is going to be less popular these days post-COVID, but certainly sandwich courses that integrate a year of working in industry are incredibly popular, especially for vocational courses like engineering, where having a year of work experience under your belt can really help your job prospects after you graduate. And then lastly, increasingly popular are foundation courses. So more and more British universities have started offering foundation courses. Foundation courses are designed to bridge the gap between school and higher education. So if a student has not quite met the entry requirements for a degree program, so maybe a student's done 3 or 4 IB courses, but they didn't achieve the full diploma, or maybe they've got 2 A-levels, but they don't have a third. They don't meet the requirements for entry into a degree program at most universities in the UK. But what they can do is apply for these foundation courses, which are a year long, which will be the bridge between where the student is and where the student needs to be in order to enter the first year of a degree program. And sometimes universities will guarantee that if a student meets a certain level on the foundation program, that they'll actually be accepted directly onto the same degree program at the university where they're studying. So again, it's worth looking at those foundation courses if that's something you're interested in. Also, foundation courses will accept students that are 17. So some students decide not to finish their last year of schooling in a traditional school, but they choose to leave school and actually enter into a foundation program instead and get into university through that pathway. That's quite a popular route and increasingly popular. And then another thing to think about is professional accreditation. So especially if you're interested in a vocational degree such as law, psychology, or medicine, you need to bear in mind that the qualifications that you get in the UK might not directly transfer to Hong Kong. So for instance, if you study for a law degree in the UK, if you come back to Hong Kong and want to practice, you will need to get an additional qualification called the PCLL, which takes a year to complete in order to be able to practice in Hong Kong. So it's important for you to know these things and think about these things when you're making your choices, because if you are holding an offer, for instance, from a British university for law and from a Hong Kong university in law, you should be aware of, how long it might take you to complete your studies if you chose to go to the UK versus staying in Hong Kong. Okay, I've just lost my mouse. Okay, here we go. There are some ways in which we can categorize British institutions. One way to do that, which has some meaning in the UK, is to do it on the basis of how old the university is. So we refer to ancient universities, which are those that have been around since before 1800. And some of the ancient universities are, of course, extremely famous, like Oxford and Cambridge. And then we have the red brick universities, which were sort of founded between 1800 and 1960s. They were named after Victorian era red brick buildings that were common in some of the cities where those universities are found. So places like Leeds, Liverpool, Bristol and Sheffield, they have architecture which is from that time period where the bricks are actually red in colour. And so red brick universities are named for that period of time. And a lot of those red brick universities, as you can see, Leeds, Liverpool, Bristol, Sheffield, they're very well established universities, and a lot of them are also Russell Group universities. Then we have the plate glass universities, which are the new universities founded between 1960 and 1992. And they're named after the modernist architecture, which they often exhibit, such as, big expanses of glass. And those universities are, for instance, University of Warwick, University of Bath, and the University of Sussex. One of the differences between red brick universities and plate glass universities can be that the red brick universities are often based in cities, so, in the city centres, and they are based in buildings which are dotted around the city so that students would need to go between those buildings for their lectures. Plate glass universities tend to be campus universities, so everything is on a site all together, including accommodation and lecture halls, so that there is much less need for travel. So one thing that you could really think about when you're considering British universities is, do you want to be on a campus university, or do you want to be living in a city where you'll need to travel around in order to get to your lectures and, to move between different departments that you might have lectures in and your accommodation. And then lastly, there are the former polytechnics, which were granted university status relatively recently, like Oxford Brookes University or Anglia Ruskin in Cambridge. And then one way of thinking about British universities, or one sort of group of universities that you might have heard of before, is the Russell Group. Now, there's nothing especially special about Russell Group universities, except that they do have an organisation, and they obviously have a reputation for excellence. The group includes, Oxford and Cambridge, the 6 original red brick universities, and then other very highly ranked universities like Imperial, UCL and Queen Mary. But I just want to caveat that if a university isn't a Russell Group university, doesn't automatically mean that it's not of excellent academic standard, or that it doesn't enjoy a good reputation. But it's just that the Russell Group universities are particularly well known, and a lot of them, of course, have been around for a long time. Okay, so I've put some resources here for where you can go to find out more about British universities. And the first port of call is, of course, UCAS, the UCAS website. They have some really fantastic resources for parents, including a newsletter that parents can sign up for, but they also have some great tools for students. Now, this pre-application toolkit is not just for advisors. Students can download it and use it too. And it contains things like mind maps and ways to brainstorm and start to organize your ideas about how you would like to decide on what subject to study at university, how to start writing your personal statement and things like that. And then there's also a whole page just for international students with more specific information that might be more relevant to international students than students based in the UK. The next resource that I've put there is a website called discoveruni.gov.uk, and it's a really amazing website. So every year, the government actually sends surveys to every student at university in the UK and ask them to complete a survey on everything from, how satisfied they are with their course, with their university, with their feedback, with their exams and assessment, with their opportunities to have input into university life through the student union and so on. And what this website does is it collates it all and makes this information information searchable. So if a student has a university in mind and a course, they can put that university and course into this website, and they can be given all of that information at a glance. And if they have, you know, maybe they know what course they want to study, but they have maybe 10 or so universities that they're deciding between, they can actually compare and contrast student satisfaction data from all of those different, you know, students that are on the same course but at different universities, to see which university seems to be, you know, delivering the course better than perhaps some other universities. So I think that's a really, really useful resource for students. And then underneath there are a number of websites that do something similar. So they are sort of aggregation websites for reviews for universities, where students can leave comments about how much they're enjoying their university experience and their experience on particular courses. Of course, there's the usual resources there, like the Times Higher Education websites and the Guardian, which also provide rankings for universities. And then lastly, lots of universities, most universities, because of COVID these days, have these fantastic virtual open day experiences. And you can access all of those through the UCAS website as well. So I suggest that if you're interested in sort of taking a virtual tour, but you don't know where to start, just go onto the UCAS website and look for the open days page, and then you can literally just, you know, there's lists of universities that you can scroll through and just choose the ones that you're interested in having a look at. And it's really like a good way to get an insight into what the university is like, what the campus is like, what the environment is like, how busy it is, how crowded, just what it is like to be a student at that particular institution. Okay, my number 3 do is to know your why. And what I mean by that is really your motivation for applying to the course that you've chosen. So you are going to spend 3 to 4 years studying this subject. Potentially it might lead to a career in this field. So you really need to be able to articulate to the universities that you've applied to why it is that you're interested in this subject. What kind, you know, where does your interest stem from? What do you hope to get out of your studies? You know, do you have any particular career aspirations in mind? Some students might not. Some, you know, it might be entirely vocational. If you're studying medicine or law or even archaeology or anthropology, there might be, you know, a really specific goal that a student has, or a specific question that they really want to have answered through their studies. And so that is really important to be able to articulate in your personal statement. The coherency of the why is actually evaluated by the academics that will read your application. So, you know, whereas in the US, your application is probably going to be read by an admissions board, in the UK, when UCAS, you know, when a university receives its applications from UCAS, there usually isn't like a central reader who reads all of the applications. Instead, all of the maths applications will go immediately to the head of the maths faculty, and all of the English applications will go to the head of the English faculty, and then they will be read by subject specialists. So your application is going to be read and evaluated by subject specialists. So it's really important that you can articulate why, you know, you're interested in that particular subject and what it is that you hope to gain out of your studies in your personal statement. Also, what the readers are going to be looking for is whether there is coherence in your story. So if you say, for instance, that you want to be an engineer, then that means that you will have chosen A-level or IB, maths and physics, or maybe design technology at higher level. So you've made choices which have already underpin and support your application for engineering. Maybe even lower down, you know, you might have done relevant IGCSEs, so you might have done extended mathematics or physics at IGCSE level. So that's what the readers are looking for as well, is do you have the right academic history and the right pathway to be a successful student in this subject at undergraduate level. So there needs to be a really sort of clear coherence where you say, I became interested in the natural sciences when I entered into secondary school. I then did 3 sciences at IGCSE. I was most interested in chemistry. I therefore chose chemistry and biology and maths at higher level for my IB diploma. As I learned more about engineering, I became more interested in a career as an engineer, and so I'm applying to do chemical engineering. You've explained how your interest has developed. You've explained how the subjects that you've taken have contributed to that interest, but also prepared you for a future in chemical engineering. And you are creating a coherent profile for the people who are reading this application in terms of, you know, an established history that has sustained over multiple years that has led up to you making this application. If you've, you know, taken A-level maths, physics and chemistry, and then you're applying to do a BA in English, it's not impossible that you would be considered a good candidate, but you would really have to articulate the why of why it is that initially you chose a really science heavy A-level, you know, subject load, and ultimately you've decided not to pursue sciences in higher education. So that's what I mean by the why, is that you really need to articulate why it is that you're applying for the subject, where your interest comes from. And then the last thing that you can use to substantiate the why is, of course, your extracurricular activities and how those activities have also helped develop your interest in a particular area. Okay, and then next one is preparing for deadlines. And of course, deadlines are part of the application process and an important part. Apart from the actual application deadlines, you might need to think about tests that you might need to take in preparation for your application. Those include, for instance, IELTS, especially if you're a non-native English speaker. Even if you speak English to a very, very high level, if English is not your first language, you are advised to take IELTS because it is just a very easy and quick way for universities to be able to evaluate that your English is sufficiently good for you to be successful on the course. If you are applying for particular subjects, you might need to take pre-interview subject tests. So for law, you might need to take the LNAT. For medicine, you might need to take the UKCAT or the BMAT. If you're applying to Oxford or Cambridge, you might need, or you probably will need these days, to take a pre-interview test like the thinking skills assessment or the natural sciences skills assessment. More and more these days, Cambridge as well as Oxford are asking for you to take these pre-interview tests. So again, it's not just enough to send off your application. Oxford nor Cambridge will actually look at your application at all if you haven't also taken the required test. So if you don't take the test and you haven't registered for the test, then they won't consider your application at all. Okay, and then the last thing is to maybe consider ahead of time your financial status. This probably isn't such a big deal for Hong Kong applicants, but it might be a little bit complicated for British passport holders living in Europe or students living in Europe hoping to study in the UK in the next year. Okay, then you need to have a sensible strategy for how you're going to choose your 5 universities. So remember, we can only choose 5 universities or 5 courses to apply to. And we need to make sure that we therefore have a distribution of the range of conditional offers that we are likely to get. So the way that we often think about that in admissions is to think about high reach, and then a target, and then safety. Now that's obviously 4, so you might want to consider 2 high reaches, a reach, a target and a safety, or you might want a high reach, 2 reaches, a target and a safety. But that's sort of broadly speaking the kind of strategy that we would consider. So I've just given you a scenario to look at on the screen there. So if a student had been predicted an IB score of 35 points with 666 at higher level, because British universities, if you're doing the IB diploma, will often specify what you need to get at higher level, then this is what this student might do. So he has his reach. He doesn't really have a high reach, but he has a reach there, which is a university asking for 36 points. And then he has 2 reaches, because we would think of 35 as a reach, because when teachers make their predicted scores, they're usually quite generous. So a student who has a predicted score of 35 is probably currently only on about 33 or 34. And so for them to actually achieve that 35 means that they're still going to have to put in a considerable amount of work and preparation. So they've got 2 reach universities there for 35. They've then got their target maybe, which is asking for 34, and a safety, which is asking for 32. So a lot of the time, students are so worried choosing universities and writing their personal statement that they actually forget to think about the spread of the universities or the courses that they're applying for. But that's really something that's worth thinking about and doing a lot of planning with, because of course you don't want to end up applying for 4 or 5 reach or high reach universities. You actually have a really bad exam experience, and actually your exam scores end up a lot worse than you've been predicted or you thought was going to be the case, and then actually you don't have any conditional offers that you have met. Okay, this is probably the thing that people ask the most questions about, because it is a really important part of your application. As I've just said, it's part of the why, so why you're interested in your subjects and why you would be a good fit for the course that you have chosen. It's the only part of the application that students are completely in control of. And what I mean by that is that students don't really get to choose they don't get to influence their reference all that much. They don't get to set their own predicted grades. The qualifications that they've already achieved are simply, scores which are already decided. So a lot of the parts of the application, a student doesn't have that much control over. The personal statement, they pretty much have 100% control over. It's 4,000 characters or 47 lines, whichever is met first, and there's really no way of circumventing that. Students always ask me, is there a shortcut? Is there something I can do? The answer is no. It really is quite limiting, because 4,000 characters get spent very quickly. But what that does mean is that you have to be a really good and concise writer in order to be able to convey a lot of information in relatively short a number of words. It's roughly 600 words. The same statement gets sent to all 5 universities, so you really need to make sure that the courses that you're applying for are the same or nearly the same at every university. And by all means, definitely do not mention any university by name. So writing something like, I can't wait to start at the University of Lancaster, that's just not, you should definitely not write anything like that, because that's going to be shared with the 4 other universities that you've also applied to. And of course, they're then going to know that they're not your first choice. Universities don't know, by the way, which other universities you've applied to. So it's not as if they get the list of the 5 institutions that you've applied to. They don't know. So they don't know whether you're their safety or whether you're their high reach, whether you're their first choice for another reason, like a geographic reason. So universities don't sort of have that inherent bias, like, oh, well, you're applying to us, but you think that we're your safety, so we're not going to give you an offer. That's definitely not how it works. The universities rely on the personal statement to evaluate your motivation for why you've chosen this course, for evaluating whether you'd be a good fit at the institution itself. They're also looking at your English fluency and your ability to write, and that's going to be especially important in essay-heavy subjects like history or law. They're also looking for information about relevant other experiences that you've had, such as work experience, extracurricular experiences, or supercurricular experiences. And you might even want to write something about your future career aspirations if that's very relevant for your chosen course. 75 to 80% of the personal statement should be focused on academics, and I'll show you some examples of what I mean by focus on academics in a minute. The suggested structure that I use for my students is always to have an opening paragraph which explains the motivation or interest in studying the subject, and also I like to link this to the student's context, so usually Hong Kong, and potentially touching on current events as well. Then you should have 3 to 4 paragraphs explaining how your A-levels or your IB higher level subjects or your most relevant DSE subjects have prepared you for your intended course of study. And don't forget your extended essay and your EPQ here if you've done one. Those are really important experiences to speak about as well. Then you only have about 20 to 25% to talk about other experiences that you've had, but you might want to talk about your reading, any lectures or courses that you've attended, or any extracurricular experiences that you've had, like MUN or debate, that could be relevant to your skills development, especially if it's relevant to the subject you're applying for. So if you're applying for something like law, where you'd have to do a lot of debate and argumentation, then obviously doing an activity like mock trial or Model United Nations is going to be important. Okay, so I mentioned there 2 different kinds of experiences that were outside of the curriculum, extracurricular and supercurricular. So I just wanted to point out that supercurricular experiences can also be very powerful when they're spoken about in a personal statement. So if a student has done a lot of reading, if they've attended online lectures, and especially during COVID, those have become increasingly common and popular. If they've done independent research projects outside of school, if they have listened to podcasts, if they've entered into academic competitions, or if they've done any university courses, especially summer courses, those are also all experiences that they can address in their personal statement. Extracurricular usually refers to after-school activities. So I've given you 3 examples here of 3 paragraphs. So the first paragraph addresses how you might talk about your academic experiences and how, studying a subject in school has prepared you and contributed to your interest in the subject that you're studying. So this student has applied for law, and they are talking about how their extended essay in English has contributed to their interest in that subject. So I'll just give you a few moments of silence to read that. Okay, so you can see here that the student has used their interest in law, but has pursued it through English in an extended essay where they've taken 2 texts which explicitly address the legal system in the writer's respective countries, and both books, both texts, offer a critique of the legal system. And the student has, been drawing comparisons between those 2 and has said that that has furthered his interest in comparative legal studies. So they've brought it back to they haven't just described what they've done, but they've then said explicitly how it's relevant to their application for law. So let's go to the next one now. So this is about a supercurricular interest. So this is a student who has attended a series of online lectures by a famous professor who is an expert in game and nudge theory. So I think you can see here how this student has wanted to justify why they haven't just applied for a straight economics course, but they've applied for economics with psychology. And so they've sort of explained why they wouldn't be satisfied with only studying economics, but they wanted to add that psychological component to their study of economics so that they had a more holistic understanding of how people behave in real life when it comes to economic and financial issues. And the last one I have here is about an extracurricular activity. So this is a student who participated in the European Youth Parliament, which is actually the photo that you can see on that slide. And they have used this experience to justify their interest in economics. So I'll just again give you a moment to read that. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Okay, so again, you can see here that the student has really shown how they've engaged with that experience. So it's not just listing, you know, I've done this activity, but they've really talked about what skills they've developed from it and how it's furthered their interest in the subject. Okay, so the personal statements, you know, the do's are pretty obvious. Use positive and enthusiastic language, use short and simple sentences, be honest, definitely don't lie about your achievements or your abilities. Use your local context. I do like to tell students that they're an expert in Hong Kong and the person reading their application probably isn't. So you can sound fairly intelligent simply by using an event or something that's happened in Hong Kong and sort of elaborating on that and making it relevant to your application or making it relevant to your subject. And that can often be a really good way into a personal statement. Do provide evidence to support your claim. So don't just say, you know, I'm a brilliant mathematician, but, you know, actually provide some evidence to support that claim. And then lastly, ask for help. Get feedback, ask, you know, your parents, everyone else that you know to read your personal statement and give you feedback on it. And then lastly, edit, edit, edit. Okay, don't do these things, okay? Don't exaggerate, we've just said. Don't plagiarize. UCAS has extremely powerful anti-plagiarism software called Copycat. And every year, tens of thousands of students are caught out. About 5% of personal statements actually have high degrees of plagiarism. When UCAS detects plagiarism in your personal statement, they notify the universities that you've applied to. And it is highly unlikely after the university knows that you've plagiarized your personal statement that they're going to extend an offer to you. So that can really just be game over completely. So not plagiarizing is super important. Don't use a really informal register. This is a formal piece of writing, and application is serious. Don't be too formal though. Don't change, you know, your ordinary language to make it sound like you're a thesaurus. They're not interested in that either. They want your authentic self. Don't always use the same sentence structures, especially resist starting sentences with the word I. And please don't be emotionally effusive in a way which comes across as a bit contrived. So UCAS every year releases its sort of 10 most common sentence starters, and this is always in the top 10 for as long as I can remember. And you can imagine students saying, for as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a doctor, or I wanted to be XYZ. It's a bit of a cliche. It sounds too emotional. Don't use the word passionate either. I really don't like that word. Express your enthusiasm, but do it by using evidence and articulating the process that you've come, through in order to develop your interest in a particular topic or subject. Don't just say something like, I've always been passionate about helping people, because that doesn't really do very much to help the university understand why you like helping people, what about helping people is important, and how does that most importantly support the application that you've made for the subject that you've chosen. Okay, the reference, we'll just go very quickly through the reference, but the student doesn't get to write the reference, nor do they get to choose who writes their reference, but they can help their reference writer by providing as much information as possible. So I really do suggest that students sit down with their counsellor, who is usually their reference writer, gives them their personal statement and really reiterates to their reference writer what they would like their referee to emphasize in their reference. It could be how much they've improved academically. So maybe the student, didn't start their A-level or IB journey very strongly, but they have come to be, they've come to be much stronger academically. That improvement process could be something that a student really wants the referee to articulate in the reference, in which case the student really needs to tell the reference writer that. Okay, and then lastly, focus on academic achievement, because at the end of the day, you need to have very strong predicted grades, and those predicted grades are only going to come from your academic achievement, and you need to actually achieve on those predicted grades by achieving strong final exam results, or else you might not end up meeting your conditional offer. So even if you get a conditional offer for your dream university, if you don't actually meet that offer, you're not going to get to go. So it's really important for you to stay focused on your academics. In the US, we talk about senioritis, where students who finish the college application process kind of stop thinking about academics, but that simply can't happen in the UK. Okay, I'm going to stop there for now. So that we have time for questions and answers. And I've just been communicating with Phil because I don't know how to find the chat, but I'm going to maybe stop sharing my screen. And
yeah, I can perhaps read some of the questions we have to you because I have access to the chat. Right now, we do have one parent who has already asked a question, but other parents who are interested in asking us a question, do go to the chat button, and then you can type your chat personally to us, or you can type it to everyone. So we do have a question from Lawrence Lee. And he is referring to a point that you made in the presentation, English as a first language. So he's asking, how about Hong Kong Chinese kids who've been in international schools all his or her life and speak English at home? Does he or she still have to take the the test that you mentioned?
So technically you don't have to. So if you're taking, A-level English or, IB, English A, which is a first language course, then the universities don't require it. But we know, for instance, that, students might choose 3 A-levels, which are all sciences, and then they don't do English. And so then what evidence does the university have that you've achieved a certain level of English proficiency? Or if you, even if you are taking English A as part of an IB diploma, we know that a lot of non-native English speakers end up on English A courses, and actually their English proficiency again might not be that strong. So if you're predicted a 4 in English A language and literature, what does that really mean? Because a 4 is not really a very good grade, even though you're in a first language course. So it can sometimes delay your visa application if it's not clear what your English proficiency level is. And also it just makes it much clearer to universities. So if you can achieve a 7.5 or above, even if you're applying for a science subject, it just gives universities that peace of mind that your English is genuinely strong, that you're proficient in English, and that you have good writing skills. So I would absolutely, you don't have to, but we have always in the schools that I've worked in strongly recommended that students take IELTS, even if they've been studying it at first language level for a number of years.
Thank you, Thea. So parents and other attendees, are there any other questions that you would like to ask? I see someone raise their hand. Okay. So we have Sarah, who just sent a message to us. If your school predicts for example, you to be a 45 for the IBDP, would universities be likely to give you a lower offer, specifically medicine?
Would they likely to give you a lower offer? So the highest offer that you would ever get, you know, from Cambridge, for instance, which is the most highly selective university, would be 42 points, maybe 43 if they had some doubt over your ability. No university is going to give an offer for 44 or 45 points. That's just way too extreme. Universities will not adjust their offers to suit your predicted grade. So it's not like they see that you're predicted 45 and then they're like, we really want this student, so we'll give you an offer at 35, because they know that if you're a 45 student and you achieve 45, you're most likely not going to go to a university that's only asking for 35 points anyway. So the universities have points that, you know, have a predicted grade an achieved grade at which they will set a conditional offer, and that doesn't fluctuate depending on who the applicant is that they're trying to attract. So the conditional offer that they will have for a particular course is the same for all students. If the offer that they're going to make you is 36 points and you're applying as a 45 candidate, what that means is that they'll probably send you an offer sooner. So because they don't really have to think about you being a suitable candidate, they're looking at your predicted grades and they're 45, they're looking at your reference, and your school counsellor has said that you're, you know, a fantastic student academically. That university then is going to be very confident that they can make you a condition, you know, they'll make you an offer at their regular level, but they know also that you're probably not likely to end up going to that university, but they'll just get those offers out very quickly so that at least you know that you have that offer in the bag. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Theo. So we do have quite a few questions. I see a parent called Lily with her hands up. We gave you access to unmute yourself. So if you do want to ask a question, Lily, maybe you can unmute yourself.
Yes, hi, thank you for the opportunity. I'm just wondering, what's the proportion of these universities taking in international students versus students already studying in the UK? Would Hong Kong students be sort of at a disadvantage because they would reserve more spots for local UK students? Do you mind sharing some stats?
The ratios, they don't really change that much from year to year, although of course with the change in fee structure, universities have started offering a much higher percentage, you know, the ratio is obviously mostly home students, mostly British students, and a smaller minority of international students. But since universities have become reliant on fees, they have increased the proportion, the relative proportion of international students that they, you know, want to attract to be part of their student body. So those percentages have been creeping up from like 10% to 15% to 20% to maybe even 30%. So international students are still a minority, but they are an increasingly important minority. It doesn't, there's no disadvantage. Like a Hong Kong student, even if they go and study in the UK, would still be classified as an international student, because going to boarding school in the UK does not change your status at all, doesn't make you a home student. So there is nothing that a Hong Kong student can do to change the fact that they will be classified as international. They're not advantaged or disadvantaged in any way. Their applications will be evaluated against other students who have similar qualifications. So there's no there's no sort of benefit to sending your child to boarding school in the UK. It doesn't put them into a different pot. It doesn't change their status. Actually, international students can have an advantage over home students, because international students do pay, significantly higher fees. And so the offers that universities make to international students can sometimes be a bit lower than the offers that they would make to UK students. So in fact, being an international student can work to your advantage, because you're a more lucrative target for a university compared to a home student. The only place where that's slightly different, of course, is for medicine and dentistry courses where there are government quotas. So because those courses are funded by the government and they're very expensive, the government is very invested in having a majority of students be home students who are more likely to stay being resident in the UK and practice in the UK. So you can go onto the Office of Student Statistics website and it will tell you for every university how many places there are for international students. So for instance, for medicine, for Oxford, there are only 14 places for international students. And that's 7.5% of the total number of places that they have. So if you're applying for medicine and dentistry, those are already extremely competitive courses. As an international student, they are even more competitive.
Well, thank you, Thea. I hope that answers your questions, Lily. We have quite a few questions from Patricia. So her first question is, applying from UK boarding schools, do the students still have to take the IELTS?
From UK boarding schools? Look, again, no one has to, you don't have to take IELTS. It's just a strong suggestion that it works in your favor, that more qualifications, especially to prove your English language proficiency, are going to be beneficial to your application, are going to be reassuring to universities extending offers to you, and are going to also perhaps potentially smooth the visa application process. So it's not that it's a requirement, once again, it's just that we recommend it. If you're applying from the UK from boarding school, probably less significant because you have been in that British linguistic, context, although of course in international schools in Hong Kong, English is also the language of the corridor. But yeah, I mean, again, it's just a suggestion. We would certainly recommend it, or I would certainly recommend it for a student based in Hong Kong. I think in the UK, if they're in boarding school, it would depend how many years they've been there, what they're applying for at university, and perhaps actually how good their English is. Because if they did join as a very as an EAL student with a very low level of English proficiency, and they have really come on leaps and bounds very quickly, then I would want to be able to demonstrate that with something which is quantitative, where I can say, look, I've come from not speaking very much English at all, and then in 2 years now, I'm at IELTS level 7.5. That's fantastic.
So we do have quite a few questions, but I do want to respect your time, Thea. So unfortunately, I cannot ask all the questions, but maybe we can have this one as the last question. Is it difficult? It is from Carrie Lee Hong Lam. Is it difficult to accept by UK university if they are in the US system for high school?
No, definitely not. There are, American qualifications are well recognized by British institutions. They will need to have a certain SAT or ACT score and a certain number of, courses with, particular grades, perhaps in their transcript. And British universities will most often ask for APs at a particular level. So they might ask for, five APs, at a particular grade level, depending on the university that you're applying for. And a particular score in, the SAT for English or maths, or English and maths. So no, American qualifications are very well recognized, and it should not put you at a disadvantage. The only disadvantage that I feel like students in the American system have applying to the UK is that often they don't understand the tone that the personal statement needs to have in terms of its rigor and academic focus, and also that their reference writers often write with that kind of American mindset of the teacher recommendation letter, which again has quite a different tone to the British reference letter. But as long as the school counsellor who's writing that letter understands that a UCAS reference letter has a slightly different tone and is more sort of evidence driven, then their applications will be evaluated absolutely equally, and that shouldn't be a disadvantage to the student at all.
Well, thank you. As I said, we do have quite a few other questions, but we want to respect everyone's time, especially Thea's time as well. So what I would propose is, if you do have other questions that you would like to ask us, you can actually arrange we do offer a complimentary 30-minute intro meeting with Thea regarding UK university application and counseling. So if you do have further questions and you would like to, or maybe talk to us on how we can help out with the application process, we encourage you to contact us at info@bnb.edu.hk, or you can call us at 21104788 to arrange a meeting. Hope everyone found this presentation useful. I definitely did. Thank you very much, Thea. And let me see, I see 3 new messages. And yeah, I think, I don't know if you see the messages there, but the parents are clapping and thanking you.
I don't see those messages at all, actually. I don't see the questions either, but thank you very much.
We will download all the questions because there are actually quite a few other questions as well. So thank you everyone for staying until the end, and hope everyone have a good evening.
Yeah, thank you for your time, and please let me know if I can help you further.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.